right, welcome to the National Lunch and Learn League, sponsored by Annie Mac Home Mortgage. If everything went well today, you've probably had a nice lunch with your broker owner present, we hope, and your mortgage partners, your Annie Mac Home Mortgage branch managers and loan officers from across the country. We try to get together once a month, usually on the first Wednesday of every month. Some of you are watching this via recording later in the month, sitting with your branch managers and getting to know us a little bit better. Today's topic is something that is near and dear to my heart. As a real estate professional for 30 years, the customer first professional designation, or the customer first philosophy. If I were going to summarize it in one word, it is all about relationship. Relationship to me means, what would it feel like if you were a small town real estate agent and you had a little sphere of influence, this little town that you were in relationship to, and you were their real estate agent. That's what the customer first professional designation is about to me. And we're going to get into my favorite topic of all time in residential real estate, which is database mining. Some of you hear that word and your mind goes in a million different directions. Well, what is database mining? I'm going to break it down to the simplest concept that you could ever relate to, and that is a Christmas list. Some of us, or a holiday list, excuse me, but you know what I'm talking about. You're talking about that list of friends and family that you make sure to reach out to during the holiday season. And if you're a good relationship builder, your Christmas list grows every year. You know, you add a few people to your Christmas list from time to time, or your holiday list, so that when the holidays come around, you remember who to send a card to and who to reach out to. That's the simplest analogy that I could give you for taking the customer first professional designation down to a couple real simple analogies. That small town feel, that relationship building, and really that holiday list that you keep and grow from. So we're going to talk in depth about database mining. We're going to talk in depth about some best practices that top realtors from across the country get to use. I'm very, very fortunate. I'm one of the lucky founders of the Annie Mac Works productivity platform, so I get to travel around. There's a big difference between have to and get to, isn't there? I get to travel around and meet with fantastic, well-paid, lucrative real estate agents. I get to sit down with them and talk to them about their database mining, their relationship building. And then I get to take it back to you and share with you some of the best practices nationwide. And I'm talking to people who do $60 million a year as an individual agent. I'm talking to teams that do $200 million a year as a single team inside of a real estate brokerage. And I'm also talking to broker owners that manage the ebb and flow of top producers versus emerging associates and rookies, and help me understand what they're doing well so I can bring that information back to you. Before we get into the customer first professional designation and, in fact, the heart of it, which is relationship building through database mining, you can define the word database mining by a few topics. Drip campaign, right? Or multiple touch marketing. Farming is a good way of saying database mining, meaning you're touching them multiple times throughout the year to really solidify building your relationship and adding value to it. But before we get deep into it, I want to do something today that we've flirted with in the past with you. We've asked some of these questions of you as a realtor before, but right now in Lunch and Learn environment, I'd like to give you an opportunity to take what I think is called the real real estate test. And the real estate test is an interesting play on words, because the real estate test that we all took when we got our licenses, you remember, a certain amount of math questions, a certain amount of law questions, and we had to take this test in order to pass to gain this licensure, right? But the real estate test is the test of income and productivity, isn't it? Because most of the lessons that we learned to graduate from that state-required licensing course, they didn't make you much money, did they? They didn't produce any revenue for you. In fact, if you interviewed tens of thousands of realtors from across the country, they'd probably tell you that the stuff they learned on the real estate test didn't even affect what they do for a living as a realtor, other than knowing the guidelines. But what about the real estate test? What's the real estate test? I'm going to have you take your hand and hide it from the other people in the room. Whether you put it in your pocket or you put it under the table, you have a potential for 5 points. But these points on this real estate test aren't for me. They're not for your broker. They're not for your mortgage partner. And they're not for your co-workers in the room. This test is for you to do some internal evaluation and really understand how you feel about your real estate career. So the first question is relevant to today's topic, and it's, do you have a database? Do you have a database of all of your friends and family? Do you have an Excel spreadsheet or a top producer account or some other Salesforce-oriented sales management database? And it could be as simple as an address book. If that's what you're using, do you have a database of all of your friends and family? Do you have a database that has the people who cut your hair, or the people who own the restaurants that you frequent, or the coach from your daughter's soccer team, or the president of the PTA? Do you add those people to your database? And most importantly, are you proactive instead of reactive? Are you proactive marketing to that database in a regular fashion, something that's consistent and ritualistic? And are you mining a database of around, let's just say 200 to 300 people would be an average database in residential real estate? You know, maybe you have way more than that, maybe you have a few less than that, but a couple hundred people that your database includes, that you're proactively marketing your expertise as a realtor to. If you do have that database and you mine that database proactively, you're probably doing your first $2 or $3 million a year from your database mining. So likely your first $50,000 to $100,000 a year in gross commission income would be coming from that database. If you're one of those agents in the room today that have a database that you proactively manage, give yourself 1 point on the real estate test. The next one is, do you have a niche? Do you have something that you claim a pride and ownership over? Meaning a geographic farm area of 600 homes, or a particular subdivision that you know everything about, you love it, you have a pride and ownership of it, and when someone asks you questions about that particular area, you know everything there is to know about it, and you're really proud of yourself when that little niche expertise is pulled in. Do you have a pride and ownership of a particular niche? Maybe your niche is equestrian communities, horse farms. Maybe your niche is tennis country clubs. Maybe your niche is multifamily and you're just a wizard on understanding ROI and occupancy rates and all the things that it takes to really understand and manage multifamily. So the second question, you're going to give yourself another point. Do you have a niche? Do you have an area of expertise? And if you do, you're probably doing your first $1 million or $2 million, maybe even $3 million a year from your niche. Your first 6, 7, 8 homes a year, maybe it's a dozen or more if you're great at your niche. But do you own that? Do you have that pride and ownership? You're going to give your second point on the real estate test. The third question is a doozy. and it has to do with your consultative resource that you bring into a relationship with a seller. You're going to give yourself an additional point. This will be a total of 3 points so far on the real estate test. Do you counsel sellers on how to properly prepare their listing for the marketplace? Are you a realtor that feels like you're bringing more value than just putting it in the MLS? Are you a realtor that says to the consumer, I can help you protect and maximize your equity? We've flirted with these conversations before, but if you really truly understand staging, you're probably a fan of a show called Fixer Uppers on Home and Garden Television with Chip and Joanne Gaines. They're realtors, by the way. How about the family that runs the show called Good Bones on Home and Garden Television? Or what about the Property Brothers? Do you see yourself in a guru status where you help sellers maximize and protect their equity? Do you help them get more out of their house than they could get on their own? Do you help them make decisions with clutter or darkness? Do you help them make decisions with welcome mats and little nooks and crannies in their house to get the most out of their house? Do you truly stage their residential real estate when they list with you? You're going to give yourself a 3rd point on the real estate test if you provide counsel to your sellers when you list their home. Number 4, and there's just 2 more questions left. Do you have a listing presentation that you're proud of? Do you have a sense of conviction like Jerry Maguire when he was invited into the living room where he said, just get me in the living room, baby. Everything else comes together once I'm in the living room because I've got a presentation, I've got an agenda that I follow, excuse me, and that agenda generally and genuinely gets me that listing because I talk about marketing, I talk about the process, I talk about my relationship to them, I talk about digital marketing and the World Wide Web, I talk about all the things that are important to them about this listing relationship, and when I'm done, I get every listing I go on because I'm the best in the business from a listing presentation. So the question number 4 is, do you have a bulletproof listing presentation that you're truly proud of, that you walk with your shoulders back, your chest out, and a little bit of swagger when you get invited into a living room? And I'm not talking about your sister's cousin's brother's friend, and I'm not talking about your aunt. I'm talking about strangers. I'm talking about families that invite you in to their home to determine whether you're the right listing agent for them. Do you have a bulletproof listing presentation that you use with those seller prospects? That would be your 4th point. And the 5th point's easy to answer. Quick to the chase here. Have you ever taken a listing from Facebook? In 2018, 19, and beyond, your sellers are frequently going to assess you on social media. They're going to see your name in a forum, bus bench, postcard, door hanger, letter template. Maybe it's a telemarketing relationship that's built. Maybe you met them as a stranger in a grocery store and you're starting to build a relationship. Don't underestimate the magnitude of them turning to their computer and researching you a little bit through social media to find out what kind of person you are and what kind of real estate professional you are. So the question number 5 on the real estate test is, have you ever taken a listing where the first point of contact that you had with a consumer was through social media, whether it be LinkedIn or Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, or Instagram? Have you ever had a seller contact you to list their home with you from one of those resources? If you've scored a 5 on the real estate test, chances are you're making nearly $500,000 a year in our business. You might be making $250,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. If you scored a 1 or a 2, you might be making a little bit less than that. And I'm talking about any market. You can really dominate and generate a lot of income in residential real estate if you could pass the real estate tests. We use those as a relationship builder to you because your AnnieMac home mortgage professional that's in the room is bringing a course today called Customer First Professional Designation, which is all about database mining. We do a very specific course called Farming Fridays that's all about geographic farming and dominating a niche. We do a class called the Bulletproof Listing Presentation, which is exactly giving you that confidence and swagger in the residential real estate listing presentation. We do a course called Real Estate Staging Expert Designation. That course is free to all of you. We just hosted 90 agents in Doral, Miami, Florida, where we celebrated all of them getting their real estate staging expert designation. And we want to do that with you as well to give you that confidence to give counsel. And then the last one is we teach a course called Hyper-Local Social Media, where we take an aggregate of top producers from all across the country and analyze what they're doing on social media well to induce sellers, not just buyers, but sellers, to contact them. Okay, so we've talked about some of the core principles of elite real estate agents from across the country. And we broke it down into 5 sections. And the first section was intentional, centered around database mining, what you could call drip campaigns, or just proactively staying in touch with a sphere of influence database, your past customers, and your repeat and referral opportunities to really elevate your income. If we have one intention from the real estate test, if we have one intention from the Customer First Professional Designation, if we have an intention from any of the work we do together here at AnnieMac, it's to find new and different ways to create a more sustainable career for you, less feast or famine, less cyclical, more structure, more foundation. And with the Customer First Professional Designation, very specifically, we look to accelerate your earning potential. We look to differentiate you in your market. And the first way that you differentiate yourself in a customer first world or a customer first way of doing business is you have to understand the experience of buying and selling a home. My wife and I just went through it. We went through all the ups and downs of searching. We went through all the ups and downs of negotiating. We went through all the ups and downs of risk that we felt about which house was right, which neighborhood was right, and what the economics were going to feel like. But we pulled the trigger and we went through it. I think having gone through the experience as a first-hand experience of purchasing a home creates a whole new intimacy for the way that you feel about the experience or the experience economy of how a realtor and his consumer can work together. To give you a great example of what an experience economy vendor is think about Starbucks. How when you walk into a Starbucks, it doesn't feel like a normal coffee shop. It doesn't feel the same as even when you go to Dunkin' Donuts. I could argue that Dunkin' Donuts coffee tastes better than Starbucks coffee. I mean, some people think that. But it doesn't matter because they were very specific that they wanted to create a distinctive environment for you when you visited a Starbucks. That is the heart of the experience economy. A couple of other vendors that play in the experience economy and do a really good example for you to think about is Apple. Apple Computers has created a cult-like following. They don't just have customers, they have raving fans. And they have an ideology that they've manifested to make the experience of using an Apple product different completely than any other computer brand. And certainly the way that their package feels when you open it. And it's often been said in Steve Jobs' biographies that he would fight aggressively for the curvature of his equipment and the way it's packaged and the way that pieces of equipment are open, and what's the first thing the customer feels when they open it? What's the second feel? How does the instruction manuals feel when they're working through it? And that experience of working with Apple completely differentiates them from HP or Dell or Compaq or any of the other computer manufacturers, doesn't it? To give you a couple more examples, Walt Disney, the Disney World Corporation, and especially the Disneyland or Disney World theme park visit, it's a completely different experience than Busch Gardens or Hershey, Pennsylvania, isn't it? The carnival that you visit at your local community, nothing like the experience of visiting Disney World for the first time. So you see these entrepreneurs, and I'm just going to rattle off a few more. I think Chipotle does an incredible job at the experience economy. Moe's, welcome to Moe's. The McDonald's Corporation, a new player in fitness over the last 20 years called CrossFit. This is an experience economy. This isn't just a place to go, lift weights. This is a true relationship that's created that manifests itself in a way that you feel about doing business with these people. If you had an ambition as a realtor, you think about this for just a moment and you say to yourself, what does the experience feel like when you work with me? What does the experience feel like? Has any national brand, and I'm proud of a lot of national brands. I think there's some achievement going on that's exceptional. But has any national brand really enunciated themselves as the consumer-centric experience economy vendor in residential real estate? Well, maybe it's up to you. Maybe you have an opportunity to adjust the way that the consumer feels from first point of contact with you as a realtor to post-closing. And I'm not just talking about up to and at closing. I'm talking about for years after closing a property with you, that there's a high-touch experience that they reference to their friends. I'm going to brag about something real quick that I'm very, very proud of. And that is a little sign writer that I used to use in residential real estate that I would give to my sellers. And when they would have this sign writer in their home, I didn't put this sign writer on their house. I said, this is for you. And if you believe that I'm the best realtor in the community, I'm the best relationship that you could have buying or selling real estate, then I want you to put this sign writer on your sign for me. But don't do it until you feel that way. It said, you got to get Russ. Corny as it sounds, and many of you are rolling your eyes right now, sold 160 homes a year for about 10 years in a row, and never had a hard time making a living in residential real estate. And that little sign writer was created by a lady named Joanne Bullion in Sunrise Golf Village in 1988 when she said, you got to get Russ. He's the best realtor I work with. And that kind of created this experience economy of, hey, if I'm on your side, I'm on your team, I'm part of your solution, not part of your problem. And I really stepped in as a consultative resource to help her prepare her home for the marketplace, to help her make all her decisions about her economics, help her timeline and plan her move for the future, and make the transition from one house to another an experience that was positive. This is potentially the most stressful and frustrating, ego-driven, economically frustrating decision that any family will ever make. Certainly has the most magnitude economically of almost any transaction in their lives, but our real estate community is sometimes a little flip about it. A little flip. So today we're going to dig in to how you can use our tools that have been proven over 3.5 decades to create an experience economy. I'm going to go through them one at a time right now. Okay, so everything we're going to go over today is already available to you in a website called Customer First Works. Customer First Works. All one word, ends with an X. Everything we're going to talk about today, you can download, you can personalize, You can edit if you don't like certain things about it. But the most important thing is that you don't have to create anything to create an esteemed experience economy. Some of these are our team's personal best practices over a 30-year evolution. Some of them are things that I picked up when I was in Denver, sitting with a $100 million a year broker who has a small team but is committed to his experience economy. And some of these things that we're going to go over are things that we brought from years and years of visiting with agents and seeing how they do things. The first thing that I use on every real estate appointment, the first thing I would recommend that you do to set the right tone with your real estate customers in the experience economy is quite simply the Real Estate Staging Expert workbook. This is an 8-page document that takes into consideration all of those things we talked about on Home and Garden Television, all of those staging consultative resources that you have at your disposal through AnnieMac Home Mortgage. So when you bring that 8-page workbook with you to sit with a seller, and you show that seller that not only do you care about getting their listing, but most importantly, you care about them getting the most out of their house. And if a couple welcome mats and some window cleaning and maybe moving some furniture out of the house or even just opening the blinds can help them increase their equity, you're setting a tone. You're setting an immediate tone of yourself as a consultant, an advisor, and a true friend and advocate in their real estate transaction. So the first document that's available to all of you is the Real Estate Staging Expert Workbook, and it helps you define your relationship to that seller as more than just stick it in the MLS and wait. You know, hey, anybody can stick it in the MLS and wait, but are you working with them to make sure they get the most from their house? The next document we originally used to call "What Can You Expect?" or "What's in it for you?" We now call it "Dependable Communication," whichever title you like best. But what this document does specifically is it lays out the specific nature of your relationship and the context of your communication with them over time. So what's going to happen during the first couple of weeks that your house is on the market? What's going to happen if for some reason your house isn't sold in 30 days? What's going to happen between us at the 30-day mark? What I used to say is we're going to come back here, we're going to sit down, and we're going to review everything that happened during the first 30 days so that we can make some adjustments for the next 30 days. In order to do that, we're going to use a document that's in this website for you called Dependable Feedback or Specific Feedback. See, what we need to understand about this document is we're showing the seller that we're going to clearly define what the buyers thought about their home, and most importantly, what the buyers bought instead of their home and why. See, passing the baton of responsibility means first you have very dependable communication. They know what to expect from you on a daily basis, weekly basis, and monthly basis. And they understand it up front in a timeline that they understand and interpret. They know what's going to happen when they call you. They know what's going to happen if they text you. They know what's going to happen if they email you. They know the people on your team. And they also know how the feedback is going to come across about the houses that are like theirs that were bought instead of theirs, or what the buyers thought about their home, why they didn't make an offer, why they made an offer the way they made it. Everything about creating an experience economy in residential real estate is about laying out the lay of the land so the consumer feels safe and they feel like they're in good hands with you. So the first document we talked about was the real estate expert workbook. The second document that we talked about was a document called Dependable Communications. I used to back in the day call it What's in It for You, this dependable communication. I'm going to caveat or take a little tangent here and tell you that I was so specific, and a couple of my team members are so specific, and some of the realtors that I admire the most nationwide are so specific that they actually make it a benefit that they don't answer their phone. Isn't that funny? That you've got a 6-deal-a-year realtor that answers his phone every minute. He's right there answering his phone. But then you have a 60-deal-a-year realtor that tells his client up front that he doesn't answer his phone, but explains why and makes it an actual benefit to the consumer. Could you imagine the difference between that experience for the consumer, always being frustrated that they got a voicemail, or understanding my priorities as a realtor and why my team steps in? That leads us to the next document. It's called the Team Seller Document. And it shows in great illustration, I think, how some individual agents struggle with trying to be the digital marketing person and trying to be the print ad marketing person and trying to answer their phone all the time and trying to communicate with their sellers effectively and negotiate contracts, and why other realtors thrive and really succeed by building a team environment that services their seller. The example that we use with this particular document is, imagine I ran a restaurant and I was the hostess. Excuse me, I'd be the host, wouldn't I? I'm the host. So I greet you when you walk into my restaurant, and I hand you your menu, and I walk you to your table, and then I quickly run as fast as I can back to the service stand, and I get my pad, and I come over and I take your drink order. Then I run as fast as I can over to the bar, and I make your drinks. And then I run back to you and deliver your drinks. Then I go back to the service stand to get my little pad. And then I take your order. And then I run back to the kitchen and I make the food for you. And then I run back over to the bar to make your next drink. I mean, it would never work, would it? But in residential real estate, for some reason, realtors, not the public doesn't have a preference here. In fact, I could argue, and I'd probably win, that the public actually prefers high volume team leaders that have personal assistants. Statistics and production pretty much proves that the top teams somewhat do it better than the individual agents because they're doing much more productive. Their customer satisfaction ratings may in fact be much higher. So this example of independable communication, of explaining to the seller why I don't answer my phone, becomes a benefit to the seller. And that team seller document that shows the struggle that so many agents have trying to juggle all of the aspects of the business, whereas a guru status team leader has more influence over his customer, because the customer actually respects or holds that guru at a higher regard, a higher level of respect than what they hold maybe the chauffeur, gopher, or jack of all trades kind of wannabe realtor. All right, I want to make sure that you have the specific feedback document. This is a document that shares with the seller exactly how you're going to give them the feedback about what the consumers thought and what the consumers bought. The next document that I want to draw to your attention dovetails perfectly from the dependable communication document onto a conversation about pre-closing drill. Now that might sound like an intimidating concept to you, but there are certain things that have to happen in a residential real estate transaction during the coordination from contract to closing, and that is a timeline that I want to explain to my seller. It gives gravity to the transaction to know all the things that are going to have to be managed during that window. And then pre-closing drill really is I think, your opportunity to create an experience for the consumer where what typically is the most stressful window in the world just comes down to a succinct 72-hour process prior to closing, where you've had experience closing hundreds, if not thousands, of real estate properties, and that you make it smooth for them. So pre-closing drill is about presupposing everything that's going to happen 72 hours before closing, 48 hours before closing, and ultimately in that last little window where everything could either be hectic or smooth, called the last 24 hours, where we're considerate of pets. We're considerate of an elderly relative that lives with you. We're considerate of the children and the packing and the process that it feels like when you have a moving truck in your front yard. Another document that I love, that I learned from a California agent, and once I learned it, I understood it intuitively. I understood exactly why it was such an important document, is in your package right now, and it's called the pricing document, the seller-centric pricing document. And the reason I love it so much is it passes the baton of responsibility regarding where we fall in the pricing continuum squarely on the seller. In other words, you say jump and I say how high. But there are some market factors that are present that affect how fast your home is going to sell, how many people are going to come see it on a weekly or monthly basis. And ultimately, if I stood on your rooftop with a red nose and floppy shoes with a great big spotlight to drive people to it, if you select a price that's below or above the retail sector, you're going to dictate as the seller what's possible from the number of buyers that are going to be interested in your home, right? So that pyramid flavor, where it's wholesale pricing, it's at market hard pricing, it's retail pricing, you decide as the seller how aggressive you want to be in this marketplace. And it's my job to explain to you that when you as a seller pick a price that's retail or above, that essentially you're going to limit the number of consumers that are going to be coming through your house during the next quarter, the next month, the next several weeks. And as long as we have that understanding up front with earnest and humility and transparency, I can live with the results, because you can't convince me as your realtor that I somehow forgot how to sell houses this month. It's just that you picked a price that was up in that echelon that harmed the Century 21 agent, the RE/MAX agent, the Coldwell Banker agent, the independent agent from Guys. All these agents were looking at your house going, well, that's a little overpriced, so they don't need to show it. So you've got to understand as a seller how pricing the house changes the number of people that are going to come see it, changes the offers, and ultimately might change the satisfaction you have with your decision, meaning your listing agent is going to become frustrating. He's not showing it as much. There's no offers on my house. But as long as you explain all that up front, and I think this pricing document really does that and helps create an experience economy that says, listen, I'm all about you say jump and I say how high. I'm all about going to work for you, but I'm a consultative resource as well. And I'm going to tell you, if this was my house, this is where I'd price it. I might eke up just a little bit, but if I needed to move in the next 90 days, this is where I'd want to price my house, okay? If you have a little more time, no. And that becomes a give and a take. And I hope you begin to use and appreciate that seller pricing document to help you with your next listing. The last two documents I want to talk about, or the last two opportunities that we have, is in the closing itself. There's an evaluation document that I'm going to strongly encourage that each of you use. The best time to have a seller fill out an evaluation document is at the closing table, because there's generally a sense of goodwill, the transaction's wrapped up, and there's a lot of downtime in a residential real estate closing. Typically you're waiting for documents to be signed or wires to be transferred in or such, and you have an opportunity to slide the evaluation document across to the couple, give them a blank envelope to put it in, so it's not that the feedback is going directly to you so that you're showing it to you, but put it in the envelope because I'm bringing it back to my broker after closing. This becomes a really neat thing for you and potentially your broker to look at later and to compile the data over time. See, feedback doesn't have to be a punch in the jaw. If you get some negative feedback, it's a lesson that you can learn from. It's a lesson. The car was really dirty. The office was in disarray. The paperwork was shabby. That's great feedback to understand how you can better your career. But as you go through that evaluation document, you see there's a 1 being the lowest score, a 10 being the highest score, and then what you'll find is customers that are in love, you just check off 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, write something nice at the bottom, and then you've got that in your envelope. Now imagine you're walking into your next listing presentation, or you're walking into your next buyer presentation where you're going to sit down with a buyer for the very first time, and you opened a binder, and in that binder you had 60 customer evaluations, and your prospective consumer was able to just flip through that binder of all the consumer evaluations and see that you not only talk the talk, but you actually walk the walk, right? So I happen to be very proud of my customer evaluation binder, and I bring that binder, have always in the past brought that binder to a seller's house, and I'll frequently leave it there. It's a little trick I learned from a college football recruiter named Schnellenberger, who was the best recruiter. He recruited for University of Miami before their magnificent run into a real dynasty in college football. He had recruited so much talent. He was an iconic recruiter. And what he said is he would leave something at the house that created a reason for him to go back. And that meant he met with the family about their son, you met with the family about their listing, but you created a reason to have to come back to the house. So leaving your customer satisfaction binder or leaving some materials that you need back afterwards is a neat little trick of the trade that you use to rebuild the relationship. And I used to include the cell phone number of my sellers right on the evaluation document so that my prospective sellers or your prospective sellers could in fact call other sellers if they wanted to. Did it happen? Very infrequently. Very, very infrequently. I could probably count on 2 or 3 fingers how many times over a 30-year period that somebody actually called the other customers. Why it's there is to demonstrate integrity and a sense of confidence that your clients are happy with you when you do a transaction, and that's what the evaluation document is for. And the very last document that I want to focus in on the experience economy before we get into database mining, which we're going to dig deep into a little bit here today, but we're going to dig deep into in Module 2, is the post-closing drill. If you were my brother, if you were my sister or my best friend, I would tell you that the single greatest opportunity you have in residential real estate is to be distinctive post-closing. Especially the 3 weeks that follow a closing, you have an opportunity to define a customer for life philosophy with your client that you just closed with. And if you'll entertain the post-closing drill, it suggests that there are things that need to happen with that family after they close. And it's as simple as a thank you card. It's as complex as a delivery of a gift to their home. It's as simple as a homestead application reminder. It could be as simple as a handwritten holiday card that's pre-addressed to go out to that family after you've closed with them. But there's certain things that happen during the first few days after a closing that are a magnificent opportunity for you to really define the texture of a customer for life philosophy. In other words, I closed, I got paid, you're in your house, forget about it. Do you know that's about 93% of all realtors in America, that's what they do? And do you know that when interviewed after a closing, the realtor admits that he didn't do anything high touch with the client afterwards, but more importantly, when that seller or buyer does another real estate transaction down the road, they say, I would have used my other realtor again, but I never heard from him again. I never had any further contact with them after we closed. So the post-closing drill is something that I didn't release commission checks until it was done. A bunch of alarms just went off in the room, but as a broker owner, I did not release commission checks to the realtor until their post-closing drill was done. And that changed the emphasis that we had on post-closing drill. I hope you'll study the post-closing drill. I hope you'll make it your own and edit it and send us some feedback if there's some other resources that you could build into post-closing drill. Something as simple as taking the closing document and putting it in an envelope and calling it a tax time reminder. I send it out on January 5th every year, and it says, hey, when you go to file your taxes this year, you're going to need a copy of your closing statement. And sending that out with a note or a letter from you that says, hey, I was thinking about you. You're going to need your closing document when you meet with your accountant this year. So if you use your post-closing drill properly, whether you withhold your commission check to complete it or not is up to you, but it turns into a checklist of things that ensure that your intention is taken care of with your post-closing, right? That you've checklist off everything you're going to do. Isn't it funny that companies like Starbucks, McDonald's, Apple, Moe's, Disneyland really come down to a series of checklists? It's just a series of intentionality that I want to make sure that it feels this way when the person selling tickets is greeting the patron at Disney World, that a certain group of things happen. And this is the way we're going to do it every single time. When a patron walks into Moe's, someone's saying, welcome to Moe's. Every single time. It's a checklist of things that fulfill my intention as an entrepreneur, as a business leader. And that checklist becomes the way we do business. That's going to help you with building the experience economy that you create with your consumers. So maybe the checklist is your RECE workbook for staging. Maybe the checklist is the dependable communication, the way that you communicate with your sellers. Maybe it's the checklist called Team Seller of who does what and why within the job descriptions of your team. It could be the specific feedback and the way the feedback is delivered to your seller, what they thought, what they bought. Maybe there's a communication during transaction management that comes down to a series of checklists that ensure that everything is taken care of this transaction and communicated with all parties. It could be that 72-hour pre-closing drill that enhances the experience, or maybe it's just the checklist of getting feedback from your sellers, so that you can, in fact, learn from the earnest feedback that your clients give you and share the positive feedback with other prospective buyers and sellers. And if I'm correct, maybe it's the post-closing drill that changes the way that you interact with your customers for life, rather than just this kind of slam bam, thank you ma'am attitude that you get your $11,000 check and then you never talk to that buyer or seller again. I'd like to think that these checklists and your own interpretation of them could help you create an experience economy where you're actually listening to the voice of the customer to walk them through this journey, this very stressful journey of buying or selling a house. The last checklist that we're going to spend all of our time together on is in this Excel spreadsheet. This is called the Customer First Database. And we've given you all of the tools and all of the resources to manage your sphere of influence database. It's a self-contained apparatus. It's all of the fields that you need to collect of the data for your seller, for your prospect, for your friend, for your family member. And remember, you can define your database by would you recognize them by face and name walking down the street in a strange place. If you'd recognize them by their face while you're walking down the street, wouldn't you put them in your database? They recognize you. They know who you are. You go to the restaurant all the time. You get your hair cut there all the time. They coach your daughter on soccer. Why wouldn't you have them in your database? And why wouldn't you be proactive and market to them? So we've given you, Annie Mac Home Mortgage and the Works platform gives you a database that's the framework for all of those contexts. And on the far right of your database, there's a section for notes. Pets' names, children's names, anniversary dates, anything you need to know about repairs they've made to their home, anything you'll want to remember if you ever get them on the phone. What's the name of their favorite football team? What's the name of are they a big hockey fan? Anything that they're doing in their life that you want to make sure you remember when you get to talking to them are the things that go into that database notes section. So I'm going to leave you for today because I probably already outwore my welcome. But I'm going to say that Customer First is 3 modules. We review the experience economy and some of the tools and resources that we have available for you in this module 1. And thank you for being here at the Lunch and Learn. I hope we spent an adequate but not too much time on each topic, including that real estate test in the beginning, because that's my baby, man. If somebody can get a hold of those 5 opportunities in residential real estate, they're gonna create a lifestyle for themselves. They're gonna create a livelihood for themselves, and we're gonna be friends for life. We're gonna be high-fiving at the holiday party. But the real estate test, moving on to the experience economy, and then showing off or showing you some of the tools that you can use to kind of checklist your responsibility in that experience economy. And now we end on that Excel spreadsheet, which is the most basic database you could ever find. Hey, take that and put it into your top producer. Put that into your Boomtown Leads. Put it into your conversion account. But you need to have that personal sphere of influence database, and you need to be growing it every quarter, every year, growing that database. I think it's funny when people mispronounce sphere of influence. It's a sphere. It's a sphere of influence, and it's constantly growing. So you're always growing the space and population of your sphere of influence. So you're constantly growing that. So you're adding to that database month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year, so that eventually it becomes a magnificent foundation for your business. During Module 2, we're going to be going over the touch points that make up an annual plan for your sphere of influence and your past customers, and all of the things that you're going to send to them via text, send to them via email, send to them by direct mail, and make sure that you touch on those holidays. So it was my pleasure, it was my privilege, and certainly an opportunity for Annie Mac Home Mortgage and you to work together on some of these core ideals. From my perspective, it's just an olive branch. It's our way of saying thank you for doing business with Annie Mac Home Mortgage, and it's our way of saying if we can help in any way, If we can help you do an extra 3 or 4 transactions a year, if we can help you change the way you feel about your real estate career and the opportunities in front of you, then we're going to be high-fiving at that holiday party, right? But for now, I'll let you go. Thanks again for being at the National Lunch and Learn League. Turn to the mortgage professional in the room and let them know what you thought. Tell them thank you for bringing this in if it was of value to you. And we'll see you next month at the National Lunch and Learn League event.